Norrington. First of all, thank you for accepting this interview for the Romanian National Television. It's an honor to have you as our guest.
Very nice to be here.
And I have to tell you from the beginning that your biography is a bit intimidating by its magnitude. And the last time I have interviewed a sir, that was Sir Salman Rushdie, and I'm gonna start by taking this point as our departure point and ask you, do things change for an artist that has been knighted?
Yes, you get the best table in the restaurant.
Great.
But you pay twice as much.
I see. So when you make a reservation and say, it is Sir Norrington.
Yes, Sir Roger, you have to say.
Yes.
Yes, then it really, the real answer is nothing changes. No, you just get on with the work.
You come from an academic family. Actually, your father has been Vice Chancellor of Oxford University, and he even invented a ranking for the Oxford colleges, right?
That's right.
The Norrington table.
Yes.
Yes.
That's
and looking back, how do you think that your family background influenced your approach to music?
Well, the main way it influenced it is because the whole family was so musical. My mother and father, they both sang in choirs, and they met singing in an amateur performance of a comic opera by Gilbert and Sullivan.
Yes.
So they really loved music. They sang all their lives. And my mother played the piano quite nicely, but just as an amateur. My grandmother, her mother, was a professional violinist. So there was music there, but music all the time. But all my brothers and sisters, they were all, bankers and teachers. And only one became a gypsy, a gypsy musician. So the music was completely taken for granted there in the family. But I think maybe the fact that it was university background, and I read history and English in school and university, meant that I had a certain interest in the historical approach to music. I didn't just take it as music. It's easy. It's not easy. You have to find out the truth.
What kind of music were you listening to when you were a teenager, let's say?
Not popular music. Only, well, actually, I wasn't listening to very much because we only had about 5 gramophone records, It was before the CD. This is in the 40s and the 50s. We hardly had any records. So I was given Beethoven's 5th and 6th symphonies, so I played them all over and over and over and over and over. And I found a nice set of Bach Brandenburg concertos, so I heard those quite a few times. But otherwise, usually it was music, we were making the music, we were singing in the family or playing with the family trio, and we made our own music in a way that doesn't happen so much today.
It's like going back to the 17th century with those Dutch paintings with concerts in family.
Exactly, but not quite so far.
If I'm not mistaken, you also have literature studies, right?
Yes. I studied, I specialized in history at school in my last years, the Westminster School, but when I went to Cambridge, to escape from Oxford, of course, I went off to Cambridge. Then I studied literature, English literature, for 3 years. Yes.
You were mentioning as one of your main inspirations, since we are talking about Beethoven's Fifth, one recording with Arturo Toscanini, right?
Yes, that's the one I had. Yes, yeah.
And that went along with you as an inspiration up to this point.
Yeah, for a long time. That's what I was used to. Quite fast and exciting. Yes, I also saw Toscanini in New York in 1944. So I saw Toscanini once, and I saw Furtwängler once in Oxford. So I had a little touch of those earlier people, but of course later I had to discover for myself.
So Roger, for decades you played for authenticity in music playing, right?
Yes.
It must have been through some sort of disappointment or discontent that you came to this idea?
Yes. I mean, when I was young, of course, I did exactly what I was told by conductors, and I thought, yes, that's very good, very fine. But then when I started to look at the scores later on, when in my late 20s, middle to late 20s, then I began to notice that they were not playing what it said in the music always. Particularly the speeds, of course, of Beethoven were often much slower than the written speeds. And I thought, well, who wrote those metronome marks in the Beethoven symphonies? And then I found out, of course, it was Beethoven who wrote these. It wasn't an advice from a school or something. It was actually the composer. This is what he wanted. So, are we allowed to go half the speed what the composer wants? I thought, no, why should we do that? Let's do what it says. Let's actually play exactly what Beethoven wanted. And I put it this way, the metronome marks are not advice, they are a part of the score. They're actually a part of the score. It's like you don't change the clarinet and put a saxophone and you don't leave out the oboe. It's the score. You do it at that speed, or very near, but you don't do it half the speed. So that seemed to me obvious in a way, and yet it was a revolution. When I did it, it was a revolution. A strange thing, because there's so much tradition in music making that everybody, he does it like that, I will do it like that. Okay. Or I will do it even slower. I will be grand, I will be grander. And of course, the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century was a time of grandness, you know, grand capitalism, later grand fascism, and grand communism. Everything was big, so the music was slow. And actually, of course, Beethoven is not even a 19th century composer, he's really an 18th century composer who just lived into the 19th century. And as for Mozart and Haydn, they were completely 18th century, and the music is not grand in that way, it's much more rooted in the dance. So these were big things to think about. And maybe because I didn't have a normal musical upbringing in a music college until later, I was free of tradition. I didn't want to follow tradition. I wanted to follow the old tradition, the tradition of 1810. What did they want? What did they expect to hear? So that was really interesting.
So actually, are you saying that the majority of conductors don't respect the original tempo, the original speed indicated in the score?
Yep, they did not. And Toscanini was nearer, but most of the others didn't. Now of course, it's becoming much more normal to play Beethoven instead of Beethoven arranged by somebody else. But yes, they simply were not doing. They didn't. People were not interested, and even now they're not interested in information, in evidence. The evidence for a speed, or the evidence for the size of the orchestra, the evidence for what the written notes mean. We re-examined all the evidence. And when I'm playing something, I expect to hear that evidence coming to life.
You crusade, and I quote, against the modern drug of vibrato, not only for Baroque or classical scores, but also for romantics, up to the early modern composers such as Mahler.
Yes, yes. I mean, it's nowadays almost everybody plays with this vibrato all the time, except we just have to remember the clarinets don't usually do it, the horns don't usually do it. In Germany, certainly the brass, the trumpets and trombones, they don't do it. The piano doesn't do it. So there are quite a lot of instruments. The harp doesn't do it. There's quite a lot of instruments who don't. But the others merrily vibrating away.
Yes.
There always has been vibrato known about. It was there's an organ stop from around 1500, very, very early, which is called a vox humana, the human voice. So evidently they thought, oh, there was a sort of exciting trembling of the voice. So the vox humana is known about, but all the people who write about music, whether it's Quantz or Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach or Leopold Mozart or Spohr or Baillot, they all say, you know, you use that when it's necessary. You don't use it as a carpet.
As a rule, yes.
As a carpet, sort of brrrr. You don't use it as central heating. Acoustic central heating. You just use it as a decoration. And that went on until around 1900. And then some people thought, well, now let's do it all the time. Wieniawski in Poland and Kreisler in Austria, who studied in Paris, they started to do it all the time. And people thought this was very exciting. It was a new century, 1900, a new age, a new sound, the sound of motor car, you know. It's exciting, it's modern, and it just took over. But the old-fashioned orchestras didn't do that so much. So the Vienna Philharmonic, the most traditional, they kept their sound until 1938. They kept the pure sound, and that's partly because they had a very old concertmaster who was old, even the old tradition. So he didn't let the young people do it. So that man who was the leader of the Vienna Philharmonic was Arnold Rosé, famous violinist, who married Mahler's sister, Justine. And Mahler was conducting his brother-in-law in the opera, when he was at the opera, the Viennese opera, and the Vienna Philharmonic. And his brother was playing with no vibrato. So we know that Mahler was used to that sound. So right up to Mahler's time, Mahler died in 1911, and right at that moment, Kreisler was getting going with, and everybody started to do it, and the old sound disappeared. But that old sound is a part of the world of classical music. It's a part of the world of Tchaikovsky and of Brahms and of Beethoven and of course of Mozart and Haydn, of course of Bach, and of Wagner even. Arnold Rosé was employed by Wagner in 1881 to be concertmaster in Bayreuth for 10 years. Wagner died, of course, a little time after, but he played, that means the Bayreuth Orchestra was playing with pure tone, or something very like it.
Yes.
And not this... So I thought, well, you know, like the tempo in Beethoven, I thought, if that's how they played, let's try it. So I try it with a Brahms symphony, and it's so beautiful. It's just so incredibly beautiful. So then I think, I want to do it again. So you do it once because it's historically interesting, you know, with your black gown and your motorboard, and historically, but you do it twice because you love it. So I love that sound. I love it in Mahler and in Tchaikovsky and in Brahms and of course in Bach. So it's a big challenge. All orchestras can do it now, if they want to. You know, I go to about 15, 20 orchestras, you know, as a guest. Yes. They all play like that. I don't say a word. They just go yes, and they like it. They ask me back. So it's a big question mark. You know, what are we going to do in the future? Will we? Can we? Is it beautiful to play like that or not? So now there's two ways.
What about the big 19th century operas? Would you apply the same technique to them?
What's an example?
The Italian opera, the Belcanto.
Well, Belcanto singing style was not a vibrato style. Mm-hmm. That was also pure. It came from Mozart through Rossini. I mean, but it was all much simpler vocal technique. So yeah, Belcanto, I would really like to hear Rossini sung like that. I've never done. I've got the orchestra to play, but not always the singers, because they're trained another way, you know, now. So I would really like that. Yeah, I mean, vibrato came in 1860. Began to be serious for singing. So it's a big change. The question is, how important is tradition to us, and how important is the old tradition? And I'm fascinated by what I find in the past.
You know, a couple of years ago, within the Enescu Festival, we had a Mozart Requiem conducted by Ton Kopman with his ensemble from Amsterdam. And I have to tell you, it was as surprising for the audience as a white-walled Dutch cathedral interior is, with no ornament and no obvious brilliance, let's say. And the audience response was mixed, I have to tell you that. In your career, did it happen to have hostile audiences or puzzled at least?
Maybe, but I only hear the people clapping. No, of course, I can't say. Certainly, I mean, not with Mozart. I haven't had that for a long time. But I mean, when I do Mahler Ninth Symphony with pure tone and so on, and different tempi, then some people get very upset. But other people think it's wonderful, you see, so problematic. I mean, I don't think Mozart Requiem should lack brilliance. It should be very brilliant, and but it doesn't need vibrato. I don't know. I mean, Torn is another guy, you know. But yeah, I mean, it's also a question of what you're used to. You know, if you're used to one thing, then it's difficult to change, maybe. But I think it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
People who are not quite happy with this non-vibrato technique usually argument that by saying it lacks emotion.
They do. God knows why, because I think it's incredibly passionate, actually, because if you don't use this, you have to use much more interesting bowing. And you'll see that in the concert we're giving with the Orchestre Chambre de Paris. They're constantly changing the bow speed, so it just isn't it's very, very varied. You get a lot more phrasing, and all the composers of the past, they always wanted the music to sing and to speak to people and not just be mechanical. So I don't get that. I don't find it lacks emotion. When you play well, it's very emotional. And interesting, when we went to Japan the first time with Stuttgart, where I was for 13 years, and we played with pure tone there. The audience was absolutely fascinated. They loved it, and the critics loved it. And they put us at the top of the list of, you know, Vienna Philharmonic and then Stuttgart, you know, chum. So they loved it. It seemed to suit them. And I asked the management of the tour, at the end of the tour, what was the most important thing about, why did they like Stuttgart? What was the one thing which was really important about the sound? And what did they say? Warmth. Warmth. They didn't think it was cold or passionate or non-passionate. They thought it was honest. And that's what I like about this sound. It's honest. It's real. It's not, you know, asking to be loved all the time. It's like, you know, it's really, I'm trying to think of the right, actress, somebody who's really serious, you know, American movie star, you know. Marilyn Monroe is always, you know, love me, you know. She's gorgeous. But then there are other people who are like Deborah Kerr, you know.
Right.
You know, and you think, she's thinking.
Lauren Bacall.
Lauren Bacall.
Yes, totally.
You know, that's the difference, you know. Some people want their music to be all Marilyn Monroe, and other people want it to be, you know, intelligent. So there you go. I mean, for me, it's never lacking in emotion. But then that's to do with the phrasing. It's to do with because the phrasing shows the emotion. It's got a lot of coming and going in the Brahms First Symphony. Or you can have which is kind of a beautiful sound, but it's not saying anything. Mm-hmm. So the emotion is in how you say it. This is very, very important in music.
So Roger, with the incredible development of technique today, we can have instruments that can sound in every way we can imagine. Still, you advocate for period instruments.
Well, I don't really advocate for them. I mean, I hardly ever use them now.
Really?
But no, yes. I mean, once a year, twice a year. No, I know I really want it. I really want all orchestras to be able to play like an early instrument orchestra. When we started the early music business in the 60s, I was one of the first. I had with the Schutz Choir in 1962, and then later the London Classical Players and so on. When we started, we thought it's all about instruments. The instruments will change everything. And with the instruments, then we have to look at the score and the number of players and the seating and everything. The instruments are it. But after a while, you know, after 25 years, we discover the instruments are not the most important thing. The most important thing is the head and the heart. Because you can play beautifully, and you will hear this fantastic playing from the Orchestre de Chambre de Paris. They're completely modern instruments, completely normal instruments, but they sound so beautiful. So, in the end, it's not about old instruments. It's about playing on any instrument you like, you know, but having the right idea, the right information, the right tempo, the right speed, the right phrasing, the right feeling. Then it's fine.
Speaking about tempo and speed and pace, are you a fast-living person yourself?
Not now. Not now. I'm much too old to live fast.
I wouldn't say that. Still, you're touring the world, traveling everywhere.
Yeah, but I go slowly. I go slowly. When we do the music, of course, if it's fast, it's fast. But no, I used to rush about a lot. But I do less work now. I used to do 30 weeks. Last year I did 30 weeks. This year I'm doing 20. Next year I'm doing 14, 12. So I'm slowing down a little bit, but also so that I can be really fresh and bring joy to the orchestras and the choirs that I work with.
Do you have like a special routine to juggle with composers, with styles, even with places in the world, so that it can be more comfortable to you?
No, I just go where I'm asked. Somebody asks me, I go there, normally. And I do concentrate. I don't do very much super modern music anymore. Yes. I used to do a lot. I've done about 50 premieres, but I concentrate on. I do a little bit of Bach and Baroque, not much Baroque, but I start really with Haydn up to Mahler. That's the central, particularly the German repertoire. That central repertoire, which is very, very hard to do. I mean, it's very hard to do a good Schumann symphony, a good Mendelssohn symphony, a good Beethoven symphony, actually, and Bruckner and Mahler, and I concentrate on that area, and that's what people usually want. You know, they say, "Will you come and play?" Or what am I doing next week in Helsinki? They want me to do a Beethoven 8th Symphony, a Schumann 1st Symphony, and a little concerto in the middle. So that's they know that that's what they want to hear, and so I'm happy to do it.
What about opera? Because you also have a history with opera, especially the Baroque opera.
I've done a lot of opera, but I don't really do it anymore. I mean, I don't do it because, first of all, I had a wonderful time when I was doing it with a wonderful company, small company, which is the best, Kent Opera in England. Secondly, I don't do it because I have to be a long time somewhere to do it. I don't live in London. I don't want to be in Chicago for 7 weeks, you know. You have to be there for a long time to prepare an opera and then to do the performances. I would rather be a week in Chicago and do 4 concerts and then leave rather than the 7 weeks. I want to be at home. So that's the second reason. The third reason is that a lot of opera production nowadays is really horrible on the stage. Really, really, truly horrible. So to find good producers is hard. I only know about 2 that I want to work with. And the fourth reason is that I can't make such a difference in opera because of the singing. With working with orchestras, chamber orchestras and large orchestras, I can really show how a new sound can happen. In opera, that's much harder. With the early stuff, maybe Purcell, Monteverdi, you can get somewhere. But even Mozart, it's very difficult to find singers who can really do what I want them to do. So I leave that to other people now. And I mean, I love to do opera. It's fantastic, fantastic music. And I'm a natural dramatic conductor, but I've retired from opera now.
Speaking of homes, your ancient home used to neighbor the home of Michael Tippett and also Edward Elgar's, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, a bit further away. Elgar, yes. Much nearer the home of Vaughan Williams and of Finzi. I don't know if you've ever heard of Finzi, but
yes.
I was quite near to that Finzi, just across the valley. Vaughan Williams up the road where he was born, and down Ampney, and Tippett a little way away in Wiltshire. Elgar was a bit further. I mean, it's about 50 miles to Elgar land.
I see.
But,
you gave up that beautiful Victorian house.
Yes.
That was a marvel. I've seen some pictures.
Yes, it's rather wonderful.
Yes.
But now we have an even more beautiful house.
Really?
Yes.
But always in the greenery, outside the boundaries of the city.
Yes. Yes, it's an old vicarage. It's an old church house in Devon, long way away, two and a half hours from London. And 18th century, was built in Mozart's lifetime.
Yes.
So it's absolutely beautiful. Charming, small, much smaller, and a fantastic view over the Devon landscape. So it's very, very peaceful to be there. I wish I was there now, except of course it's so nice to be in Bucharest.
How do you like to fill your free time, if that free time exists?
Oh yes, a lot exists. I mean, even when I was working the hardest, 28 weeks a year, I had 28 weeks free at home. So, yeah, I read a lot, all sorts of different things: history, science, biography, art history, and then I walk a lot. Walking on the Devon hills are very, very steep. It's hard, quite hard work, and also down by the sea. We're about 10 miles from the sea. You can see the sea from the house, and so I walk a lot, and read a lot, and I don't study too much. We're exploring this new landscape because we're new there, and it's so beautiful. So we spend a lot of time just wandering around and having a look at the beautiful places. It's nice to be a little bit half retired. That's what I'm planning to do. Half retired and half doing nice work.
Did your son follow your musical footsteps?
Well, I have two sons.
Yes.
I have three children. One elder son in his 40s. He works in television actually. He's a sound designer for films. He plays viola, amateur, and my daughter is a professional cellist living in Brussels, very busy. And then I've got a much younger son of 22.
Yes.
Who is, he also sings very well, plays the violin and the oboe and the lute, but he's actually a scientist. He studies biology. He's just studying biology, doing a master's degree in Bristol University. So they're all musical, but I don't push them. You know, if they want to do music, fine. If they don't want to do music, that's also fine.
So Roger, thank you very much for gracing us with your presence.
Nice to talk to you.